Hello, my friend, and welcome. I'm so glad you could stop by today. We're here on my website where I have been chronicling the lives of 54 generations of my Sims, beginning with the very first Sim that I ever created in The Sims 4. If you would like to check out that very lengthy story, you can find it through a series of blogs linked down in my profile. It will take you to the main blog where I'm publishing the most recent of the stories and kind of bring you back to the past. But to set you up with what is coming forward, I wanted to kind of dive into the past just a little bit so that you see where the founder of our new Not So Berry comes from. Once upon a time in the little town of Henford-on-Bagley, there lived a boy named Artie. Artie had two parents who were very much into the live off the land kind of lifestyle. They gardened, they had their own animals, they pretty much did everything that they could and lived a very simple life. But Artie dreamed of something much bigger. He wanted to be a star. He was a natural talent for acting, and that was his goal. He wanted to make sure that the world knew his name. And first, he had to start out with a little bit of education. The training for acting in a small town, it didn't really have the opportunities that he needed. He was able to eventually make it to kind of a more private school, and the opportunities were a little better there. But if anything, it really led to him being able to go to university and really learn his craft before he jumped in. When he graduated, his parents, Amber and Demetrius, went all out on celebrating his major achievement. They were very proud of him, and they knew that their son was going to be a big name someday. They were so confident in his success that they actually gave him the money needed to buy a home in the very expensive Del Sol Valley, and he moved there ready to set out and achieve that dream. He did find that life as an actor was pretty dull sometimes, not the excitement that he'd expected, and he really had to work hard. The modern age of acting really needs you to be very well rounded, not just getting on the TV screen and the movie screen, but the computer and the phone screens too. So he was out there really giving it his all. It also helped that Artie was very multi-talented. He had kind of a natural zest for music. He just singing, piano, guitar, all of it. He just was a natural at performing, and it definitely came through in his work. His big break was getting a part on the show Growing Up Crumple Bottom, and he really got along very well with the cast. He's just one of those very likable people, and everyone liked him, except for Gage. Gage was this kind of like over the top, arrogant type jerk who just thought that he was better than everybody, and he would call Artemis things, not to his face, of course, like talentless hack and useless small town wannabe. He just had some kind of weird distaste for Artemis that just never made sense. Oh, and I just said it there, Artemis. You see, he thought Artie was just too simple of a name and decided to go back to his full birth name. He thought it, sounded more sophisticated, I guess. After the start of the show, honestly, Artemis just skyrocketed to fame. He was not afraid to play any role, and he did it well no matter what he was doing. So it was inevitable that he would become super famous. He'd even occasionally have fans show up at his door trying to give him special gifts. And then he met Haven. Haven just instantly swept him off his feet. He was kind of just not himself. He completely lost all sense and reason when she was around. There was just something about him, about her, that he couldn't resist. Their whole romance just moved so quickly, and it was very public. and sometimes a little too public. And honestly, it really surprised everyone when they decided to get married just weeks after meeting each other. Well, it turned out there was a reason for that. Haven had fallen pregnant during a little, moment between the two of them, and she hadn't been quite as careful as she'd intended. And Haven, as a bit of a social media influencer more than actress, was very concerned about her image at the time, and she definitely insisted that they get married. It wasn't necessarily something Artemis was ready for. He felt that it was something he had to do. He was kind of caught up in the moment and ended up proposing right in front of the paparazzi. I guess Haven was a little old school in her thinking because she insisted on the wedding happening as quickly as possible. She didn't want people to know that she had fallen pregnant before the wedding, so she wanted to get that all rushed through as quickly as possible. I'm sure she was absolutely mortified when Artemis's own mother showed up, very heavily pregnant, by the way. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen a bride so upset to walk down the aisle. She must have gotten a little caught up in the moment, at least, because one would almost think she was happy. Artemis's parents were super excited about the idea of being grandparents, but they did have some concerns. That whole the spidey senses, they were like, something's not right here with Haven. And she tried as much as possible to let her son know, we're here if you need us. If anything happens to happen, you've got us in your corner. Keep that in mind. Haven hated being pregnant. She absolutely had never intended for this to happen, and the whole process, it was just too much. She was just disgusted by herself and the whole process, and it just, yeah, it was all too much. And during that time, they're both busy in their careers. They were barely crossing paths. Both Artemis and Haven always had something to do, and they weren't always doing it together. In fact, there were times his rival Gage was having a little bit more time with his wife than he was. She probably would never admit it, but Haven was feeling very insecure and just needed validation from someone that she was still gorgeous. And Gage, being Gage and the awful human being that he was, knew that he had the perfect opportunity to come in and really make life miserable for his rival Artemis. Artemis was blissfully unaware. He had just gotten a major movie deal and he was just on cloud nine. And then on top of that, he had gotten very excited about the arrival of the new baby. She was coming any day and he couldn't wait. Haven, on the other hand, she wasn't feeling it. After a series of complications and a emergency C-section, baby Taryn finally arrived. Artemis adored his daughter. She instantly became his entire world. And unfortunately, Haven kind of got pushed to the side a little. Honestly, Haven wasn't all that involved as it was, and it wasn't that hard for Artemis to kind of forget she existed. As someone who thrived on being the center of attention, Haven didn't handle this too well. Maybe it was some kind of last ditch effort to get Artemis's attention, but Haven got to the point that she was openly flirting with Gage right in front of him. Artemis did start to feel like, it's been a little while since we've been romantic. Maybe something might be going on. I mean, Artemis has always been a bit oblivious to things. But then one day he actually walked in on them together and he knew and he could not deny what was going on. The trust between them was damaged and, he considered his options and decided that it was just too hopeless. Things had gone too far from what they had been, and he made the decision to separate from his wife. Things did get a little weird for a while there, and Artemis started to question whether Taryn was even his. He did have a paternity test, and fortunately, it was his daughter. Even with that reassurance, Artemis just kind of was not himself after that. He had just really discovered that his whole life felt like an illusion, that the acting was more real than his own life. So he did what he did best. He acted his way through it all. He acted like he didn't care, and he moved on. And honestly, it paid off. He became a star, a superstar. In the end, the divorce was finalized, and Artemis was left with nothing financially. Fortunately, the judge kind of, he picked up on the fact that the only reason Haven even wanted Taryn was to hurt Artemis. And with that in mind, he awarded full custody of Taryn to her dad. It was at this time that he reconnected with his high school friend, Galaxy. Galaxy had been that girl next door that he knew his entire life. They had been best buds from day one, and, she was there for him. Now, Galaxy had her own sad story. She'd been through her own difficult times. She had been married, but her husband died in an unfortunate cowplant accident and left her and a young son. We jump forward about a year or so, and the two of them have found that friendship could be something deeper. And it became something deeper. And eventually, they and their children moved in together and became a family. Galaxy turned out to be a pretty awesome mom. Basically, Haven's complete opposite. She treated both Taryn and her son as though they had both been hers. Even Grandma took to little Bryce like he'd always been part of the family. Eventually, Artemis was able to get over his fears, and he finally proposed to Galaxy, and the two of them married. And then there was a little bit of upheaval in the life of his parents. You see, his mother had given birth to two children since he left home, and both of those children took very much after her and not at all like his dad. Now, you may have noticed that Artemis very much took after his father, and this, for some reason, led Demetrius to think that the second two children, or second and third children, were not his. It led to a whole thing. Amber had been faithful to him their entire lives, and she was just completely beside herself. She couldn't understand where he was getting this from. It was a mess. And then she began to wonder if maybe he had been unfaithful during their marriage, when he ended up marrying another woman just 2 months after they divorced. It was at this time that Artemis and Galaxy made the decision to move their little family right next door to his mom. They thought that she might need some help being on her own with two kids, and that seemed like the best option. So they made it back in time for Taryn to celebrate her birthday and for Bryce to also celebrate his. It also meant the start of a whole new career for Artemis. He'd grown tired of, the fakeness of acting, and he wanted something real. He wanted to give back. So he decided to get into politics. Now, he wasn't looking for, your typical political kind of thing. He really wanted to do the thing where he helped people, where he worked for charity and raised money and just generally gave back. Things went on pretty well for years. Galaxy had taken a job as a teacher and she was very well loved. Artemis was kept very busy with his charity work and was always on the go, actually, probably more busy than he had been as an actor. This often meant that he was not really there as much as they would have liked, but at least he was able to make it there for his daughter Taryn's birthday. He'd also discovered that Bryce had a natural talent for music, much like his own. They may have only been stepfather and stepson, but you would have thought that Bryce had been born his. The two of them were just like two peas in a pod. Having his mom next door had also become a bit difficult at times. Now, she had remarried, but he wasn't exactly the most talented when things broke down. So, Artemis spent a lot of time over at her house repairing things. I think Artemis started to think that she was breaking things just so he'd come to visit. It was about the only reason he ever made it over there because he was so busy all the time. Unfortunately, it meant that Galaxy had to do a lot of the work around their own home, and she wasn't quite as talented with it as he was. She probably should have stayed away from anything electrical, especially when there was a puddle right underneath the fridge. Artemis came home just a little too late. Even their cat took it out on Grim. Nobody was happy, and everybody was, excuse my pun, shocked at the death of Galaxy. And now we jump forward many years. Artemis did get a little bit reckless after the death of Galaxy. He kind of slept around a bit. He definitely took advantage of his fame. He was definitely hurting, and it meant that he just kind of tried to find that affection wherever he could. And yeah, not a great thing for his reputation, that's for sure. It did suffer a little, though he still did quite well. There were a few times things would come up and it'd be like, are you sure that you're actually as charitable as you're claiming to be? Because you sure seem to be living pretty well. And as a result, Artemis would actually donate nearly every penny that they had. And, times have been a little difficult financially because of it. As you can see here, they have only 1,200 simoleons to their name. Considering his history, that's not a lot. Bryce grew up. He once again took after his stepfather and joined the political career. Although Bryce probably takes more of a right-leaning sort of track here, and he's definitely much more about kind of the opposite of Artemis. It does lead to a little bit of, disagreement between them, but their relationship is pretty strong and they get through it. Taryn, as you can see, has grown up quite a bit. She is almost going to be a young adult. She's definitely she's an interesting child and teen. She has kind of grown up with a very weird mixture of experiences, and she's very intelligent, very scientific minded, very logical. But there's this weird little mischievous streak in her. Nobody really knows where it comes from, but honestly, with everything she's been through, it's probably for attention. I should mention that her grandmother passed away not too long ago, and her uncles live next door yet. That diverse life has definitely meant that Taryn has developed a lot of different skills, but not very strong skills in any of them. She has recently joined the chess team, just a fresh recruit to the chess team. Her logical side, it makes sense that she's going to want to, kind of hone those skills. Now, as required by the challenge, which we will go over in case you're not familiar with it, she is a bit of a perfectionist, geek, genius, materialistic, and vegetarian. Now, we also have some mods that kind of roll some extra talents here and there. So things like that are include the gifted video gaming player and the gifted author. She's not really popular or unpopular. She kind of sits in between. Much like a lot of her personality, it's kind of in between a lot of things. She was raised with very high self-esteem. Her dad and her mom, while she was alive, both always told her she was great at everything. The dastardly trait comes from the deviance aspiration that we need to complete as part of the challenge, and she is gregarious from a earlier popularity aspiration when she was a child. And the more observant types are probably wondering, well, who is that other person who's down there in the family? Well, that is Alice. You know how I was mentioning earlier that Demetrius has kind of been making a few rash decisions in the romantic life? Well, Alice was one of those rather brash decisions. He was out at the bar in Strangerville, and she happened to be there, and the two of them connected in more ways than one, you might say. And as a result, we have Mora. Mora is the daughter of Artemis and Alice. It was not until Mora had actually been born that Alice let him know that she was even expecting. And it definitely came as a bit of a shock to Artemis. He hadn't planned on having more children. It actually only planned on Taryn ever being his only child. And, life had kind of changed things up for him a bit with Bryce, and he'd thought his family was complete. He'd never really planned to settle down again either. He'd been through so much with Haven, and then the sudden and tragic loss of Galaxy. He just felt like he was done with love and really just wanted to be free. But, Artemis being Artemis, he didn't want to not be in his daughter's life. And to him, he felt the best way was to ask Alice to move in with him. Alice wasn't really keen on the idea. She really didn't want to just suddenly move in with him. I mean, she barely knew him, to be honest. But at the time, she was living in a house in Strangerville, renting with 4 other roommates, and honestly, not the greatest ideal situation for a baby. And so she decided to give it a try. They're on a bit of a trial basis right now, and Bryce has actually taken over her rental spot at the house in Strangerville. So Bryce's room became Mora's room, and it's all kind of, I guess, working out. And that's where we are for now. I did first want to say, for those who are interested, you can find the link to my website in the description down below. It's actually in the description of every one of my videos, so it should be easy to find. And that will give you all 54 generations up to the point that this challenge is starting. I will have the bit that's kind of missing from when we hop from when Taryn is like a toddler on up to a teenager. The rest of that story will also be on the website, hopefully by the time this video goes live. Now, I have done the Not So Berry challenge once before with this same family many generations ago, and I will try to find and link the beginning of that in the description down below. I wanted to do something a little bit different, but still kind of stick to the general vibe of the original Not So Berry challenge. This particular version also will be linked down below, but unfortunately, I don't actually know who wrote this version. I can't find the source of it anywhere. I had saved the document, assuming that the author was in some way associated with the document. And if anyone who's better with Google Docs could help me out there and knows how I might find that out from the document itself, please let me know, because I would love to give credit where credit is due. But I do have this. I have looked for it, and I keep coming up with other Not So Berry Redux redo type versions, and never this specific one. I like this specific one because it is actually quite simple. There's not a ton of rules to follow, but there is a little bit extra added. One thing, as an example, here in the first generation, is live in Strangerville as a young adult and continue to live there. That is something that is new and not in the original, but also makes use of some of the extra packs that we have gotten. So it's fairly true to the original, but with little added bits to make it a little more interesting and a little bit different. So, Generation 1 is Mint. Now, generally, with this Not So Berry challenge, you kind of make your sim take on kind of a mint persona. You know, it might be mint hair or mint clothing, mint furniture, a mint house, all of the above. And honestly, if you choose, you probably don't even really have to do that. It's just kind of a designation for this generation. I think most people try their best to surround each generation with a color, and you'll probably find that I'm doing that too. I won't always adjust their hair to match, especially in situations like mint. Yes, I know that there are mods and stuff, but I generally like to keep, and despite the thousands of mods that I have and custom content, I generally try to keep it to the EA made colors. So there's not really a mint that is available within that for hair. So, Generation 1 Mint. You're a mischievous scientist that really loves the color mint. You're career driven, but still make time for silly pranks and outings with your closest friends, with a love for luxury. You deeply strived to create your ultimate fantasy image, a mad scientific mastermind. Traits are vegetarian, genius, and materialistic. And if you'll recall from when I was showing off her traits before, she has some additional ones. I have a mod that allows for me to make Sims vegetarians without using up a trait slot. So that's why I added the perfectionist trait, because I felt like that kind of fit her as well. The aspiration is Chief of Mischief, so that means we're going to get up to a lot of trouble and fun. And career is Scientist. I have made the decision to send her to university before we jump into the career. She will move to Strangerville before attending university. I would like to start it out. Her dad has like no money, so there is no money to give her to make that move, and he's probably not going to be thrilled about her wanting to leave home. He's the type that would want to set her up, but I like a good rags to riches, so that's kind of where we're probably going to go with this. It's going to be a very simple, very small, just barely a house kind of situation until she gets through university. I might have her dad pay for university and then move out of the house. We'll see. I also have a mod that reduces university to only 8 credits, so it only takes 2 terms. I think that this will keep it from getting to the point where we just want to scream from boredom, because university, in my opinion, in The Sims 4 does get a little long, a little repetitive, and we'll probably kind of skip over the majority of that, other than when she's working on her aspiration. The goals for Generation Mint are to master the scientist career, live in Strangerville as a young adult and continue to live there, complete the Elements collection. Now, this is probably the one I'm most dreading from the goals, because this one, the first time I had to do it, was already traumatic enough. We have already gotten started on it a little bit as a teen. She has collected a few elements, and so we've got a little bit of a jump start there. We need to make at least 3 enemies and assign a voodoo doll to one of them. That shouldn't be too hard. She's already making some unpleasant choices with people around her. We need to have only 1 child. Master the mischief skill, master the logic skill, and complete the Chief of Mischief aspiration. So as you can see, not too horrible. I think we can do this. So now that you know a little bit more about Taryn and her family, I hope you are as excited as I am to get going with the Not So Berry challenge. Tune in next week and we will get started. At that point, Taryn will be just about to age up into a young adult and we can start this whole thing in earnest. So I will see you then. It was so great to have you here today. If you had a good time, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with a friend. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and notifications so you know when a new episode drops. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas for this challenge going forward. Feel free to leave a comment down below. Have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you again real soon.